In April 2005, I arrived home from school and snuck into the designated computer room in my family's suburban home. I was 13 years old, wearing a zip-up velour tracksuit, no doubt, and had just heard about a new website called Myspace.com from one of my friends at school. Sitting down at my family's desktop PC, I fired up Internet Explorer, typed in the domain, and entered my email address, swimmingqueen33@hotmail.com, to register. Within months, all of my friends had joined the site, and by the time I started high school in the fall, we had all swapped hours a night chatting on MSN Messenger for hours a night clicking around on MySpace. The site was exciting. Unlike other social networking sites and chat rooms we'd tried, it felt like there were no rules on MySpace. We could message our friends, discover new music, customize our profiles to suit our ever-changing teenage personalities, and best of all, we could stalk any profile we wanted. There was also an element of exclusivity to MySpace with its top 8, a feature that allowed users to rank their favorite friends from numbers 1 to 8. As teenage girls part of a competitive friend group, top 8 gave us an easy opportunity to raise the social stakes. Despite this initial thrill, our interest in MySpace quickly died. By 2006, most of my friends were primarily interacting on Facebook, and 2 years later, I logged onto my MySpace account for the very last time. As 90s babies, my friends and I were the MySpace generation. But regardless of the site's unprecedented success, it couldn't hold my generation's attention for longer than a few years. From Centennial World, I'm Lauren Meisner, and this is Infinite Scroll, a podcast about internet culture, the creator economy, and how social media is shaping Gen Z. Welcome back to Infinite Scroll, everyone. Oh my God, I am so excited because today, this morning, we launched Mini Scroll. So you guys will have seen there's been maybe 2 or 3 episodes before this one goes live since last week's. And it's so exciting. The reception so far, even just in the first couple hours, has been honestly amazing. I am just so excited to be bringing you guys so much more content every single week. So that's been the big project for me in the last, few weeks, but definitely few days. It's been a big thing to get off the ground, and we had Easter weekend in there as well, and Sean and I went up to Tamworth to visit his family. That's where he's from. So it was really nice. I did have a proper break over the weekend, but I had to work extra hard to get that break because I knew I needed to take 2 or 3 days off without working at all, which, to be fair, I normally wouldn't do under normal circumstances, but especially with everything that's gone on since the beginning of the year, I haven't had a single day where I can't work. So I really focused on getting a solid break. I think I did 3 full days of no work. Yeah, I did 3 full days of no work, Friday, Saturday, Sunday over Easter, and it was so nice. I do feel refreshed, I feel revived, and I'm very excited. And I'm also really freaking excited for this episode. MySpace holds such a special place in the heart of a millennial. And I know we talk so much about TikTok and just Gen Z things here on this podcast, and that is obviously the crux of the podcast. But diving into millennial internet culture is something that I'm looking forward to getting into a little bit more as the podcast evolves. I think a lot of you guys are interested, even if you are Gen Z, in what our experience online was in those early days, because it's so different than it is now. And this episode, again, I needed a little bit more levity. I needed something more fun to cover this week. So I am bringing you the rise and fall of MySpace. But as always, if you guys like this episode, if you like my podcast, please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. It means so much. It helps my business grow. It helps the podcast grow. It literally makes my life. Please also sign up to our newsletter, which is called Infinite Scroll. On Wednesdays, we send out a commentary article about a trend, creator drama, or news. And on Fridays, we round up the 5 biggest think pieces on the internet from that week. Join our Geneva group as well, which is called Infinite Scroll, where you can chat with other people who are obsessed with internet culture and creator drama and tea. And you can also chat with me. All right, on to the reviews. I just have a couple YouTube comments that I wanted to read. So one is from Erg 9822, who said, I always find myself intrigued by the topics used on this pod. Also, I really like your personality. Thank you. That is so sweet. And then, oh God, I don't know if I can pronounce this. D1 Jida. Okay, I'm not going to try. Someone else, I'm sorry, I can't read your username, said, so excited for Mini Scroll. It'll be the perfect content for that 20 minutes of sitting in my car before work. Exactly. That is the whole point. So, as an internet culture podcast, I thought it was about time to expand these deep dive episodes to encompass more about the history of the internet and social media. And as I started to look into these origins, I found that Myspace was way more influential in the evolution of internet culture than I previously thought. The story of Myspace is the reason that certain platforms dominate the social media landscape today, shaping internet culture as we know it. And as a true millennial, Myspace also holds a very sentimental place in my heart. And I was curious to know how such a powerful platform for my generation could crash and burn so quickly. The story of Myspace starts in the late 1990s with the purchase of the domain Myspace.com. Myspace.com was initially an online file storage site. Now, if you know anything about that time in internet history, you'll know that the early 2000s were when the dot-com bubble burst. The dot-com bubble was a stock market bubble that ballooned in the late 1990s and reached its peak in March 2000. It was marked by the mainstream adoption of the internet and brought about a boom in venture-backed dot-com companies. After this bubble burst in March 2000, many of the earliest internet companies went out of business after investment dried up and they failed to become profitable. This is now referred to as the dot-com crash. Myspace.com, the file storage website, was one of those that crashed. Amid the crash, a man named Chris DeWolf bought the Myspace domain to hold on to in case it became useful in the future. In his final year of his MBA, Chris took a course titled The Impact of Tech on Media and Entertainment, where he came up with the idea of Myspace for his final class project. Chris's class project was called Zeitgeist, which combined elements of City Search and Match.com mixed with instant messaging. He didn't do anything with Myspace.com or action the idea he came up with for his class project yet. In 2001, Chris and his colleague Tom Anderson co-founded a direct marketing company, which focused on email marketing campaigns called ResponseBase. And yes, Tom Anderson is that Tom. Chris and Tom had a ton of internet experience between them, and that experience helped their company grow quickly. After a year, they sold ResponseBase to a bigger marketing company called eUniverse, now called Intermix Media, for $3.3 million. Now, the history of eUniverse is a bit contentious. It was a very successful online marketing company because in its early days, it owned a bunch of websites that were known for scamming users, dodgy advertising, and phishing emails. Obviously, back then, the internet was so new and users were more naive. So eUniverse somewhat preyed on that, building an email list of over 20 million. The company's shady business practices, however, led to a really poor industry reputation. Nevertheless, Chris and Tom joined the company, and shortly after, they started working on a project inspired by the social networking site Friendster, as well as Chris's MBA project. With Chris already owning the domain, they launched their social networking site on Myspace.com in 2003, with eUniverse as the parent company. eUniverse's reputation, however, would plague Myspace for years to come. Given that Myspace was backed by eUniverse, they had a significant advantage when it came to promoting the platform. Initially, Myspace's user base consisted primarily of eUniverse employees, where the company would hold competitions to see who could get the most users to join the platform. Otherwise, Myspace used eUniverse's contacts, which, as I mentioned before, consisted of millions of users and email subscribers to populate the platform. With Myspace aligning with similar social platforms at the time, like Friendster and LiveJournal, it fit neatly into the cultural zeitgeist. But there were a couple of key reasons why Myspace soon became the go-to social media platform. First, Myspace improved many of the existing functions that were common on contemporary platforms. For example, instead of only being able to view profiles of people that you were friends with, you could view any profile on the platform. Users could also friend anyone on the website, making it easier to expand your network than ever before. Part of this network was the top 8, where users could rank their best friends, essentially, from 1 to 8. Top 8 gave Myspace an element of exclusivity for its users, and it also created a very interesting dynamic between friends. When my friends and I got Myspace, as mentioned in the intro, it was around 8th grade. Top 8 created this unspoken rule within our friend group that you basically had to put each other in the same position as each other in your top 8. So if my friend Amanda, for example, had me as number 4 on her profile, I had to put her as number 4 as well. The only exception was if you had a best friend, quote unquote, from childhood or outside the friend group, like a family friend, someone like that, that everyone knew about. It was okay if they were ahead of your other friends in the friend group. So for me, I have a best friend named Sierra who I've known since I was 3 years old before my family moved cities, and we've stayed best friends our whole lives, and we would always visit each other every single summer. So my group of friends, they all knew Sierra and I knew her friends. So Sierra was allowed to quote unquote trump my school friends in the top 8. For many millennials, top 8 was the first time that the online world really blended with real life in a way that involved interpersonal stakes and negotiation. Being able to friend anyone or view anyone's profile was extremely exciting for young people at the time. It offered users the freedom to alter their identity and connect with anyone they desired. This also made it easier for aspiring celebrities to build a following, essentially creating the concept of an online influencer. Obviously, this accessibility came with its problems, especially because when Myspace first launched, the platform didn't verify the email addresses of those who registered. While this meant that fake identities proliferated the website, kind of like catfishing, it also allowed people to be whoever they wanted to be. Another reason why the platform became so popular. Secondly, MySpace became so popular because the platform was extremely customizable, where each user could adjust how their page looked. Users started learning code like HTML in order to personalize their pages, adding an additional layer of user-driven content to the platform. Research fellow Kate Miltner and lecturer Ysabel Gerrard explain, quote, "At the crux of MySpace's popularity was its considerable flexibility. Anyone with a MySpace account could use HTML or CSS to customize their personal profiles in a manner unparalleled by contemporary social media platforms." This ability to edit your page actually came about by accident. As Julia Enman explains, the platform's lead developer, Duc Chow, left a month after MySpace launched. Chow had used the programming language Perl to build the platform, but after he left, no one on the MySpace team knew how to use it. The company started paying 2 developers, Gabe Harriman and Ton Nguyen, to rebuild MySpace using Adobe's Cold Fusion. Quote, "While rebuilding the site, Harriman and Nguyen made a mistake. Normally, websites that accept contributions from users, such as text entries or photographs, block users from inserting web markup language, such as HTML, into those submissions. But Nguyen forgot to block web markup language in user submissions. While this mistake maybe seemed like a major issue at first, it was a significant part of the reason behind MySpace's success. It injected a sense of personality into the internet at a time when the internet was not typically used as a means to express yourself. Quote, "Suddenly, teenage girls could decorate their MySpace page with hearts and glitter and smiley faces the same way that they were decorating their lockers and book bags." Anwin goes on to note that the ability to personalize a profile fit with the generation of teenagers who became known as the, quote, remix generation. As creativity and self-expression started blossoming online, teenagers became, quote, used to downloading music from the internet and mashing up songs together to create remixes. And this brings us to our third reason for MySpace's rise: music discovery. Musicians became a major part of MySpace's culture and rise. The platform launched right after mp3.com, which was a free music sharing website that many independent artists used to promote their work. After mp3.com fell victim to the .com crash, artists were looking for a place to grow their followings and their fan bases. As early as 2004, artists were partnering with the platform. Most notably, the band REM partnered with MySpace to preview its album Around the Sun, which was part of Warner Records. Quote, "When Anderson realized that musicians were joining the site, he contacted them to ask what he could do to support them," cites a 2006 academic paper titled Music as Cultural Glue, Supporting Bands and Fans on MySpace. Quote, "In early 2004, MySpace launched music profiles based on the feedback that they received. While these profiles looked like regular MySpace users at first glance, they offered, quote, a calendar of gigs and a mode of music distribution. Musicians were also listed separately on the platform, allowing for users to search for bands directly. Further establishing MySpace as a music discovery platform, the team later added a Flash player where users could stream music from their profile. Ultimately, MySpace helped musicians grow, and musicians helped MySpace grow. And the platform became a cultural force in music discovery, kind of like TikTok is today." Something to think about. Allowing users to discover different artists and bond over niche genres and bands, MySpace was really the first mainstream website that facilitated digital community building, something that we now know is extremely important in sustaining and growing a social media platform. Because of these reasons, MySpace's rise was extremely quick. The platform broke 1 million unique visitors per month by June 2004, approximately 10 months after it first launched. Now, the cultural impact of MySpace in its heyday cannot be overstated. The platform had a massive influence on the aesthetics, music, and language of the time, and we can still see a lot of this influence in both mainstream and internet culture today. As I just mentioned, much of its cultural influence can be attributed to MySpace as a music discovery platform. And this was actually user-driven, at least at first. Arctic Monkeys is by far MySpace's most prolific musical success story. While the band played its first show 2 months before MySpace launched, it wasn't until someone created a fan page for Arctic Monkeys on MySpace in 2003 that they really blew up. This is one of the earliest tangible examples of fandom expression online. After YouTube launched in 2005, MySpace made it easy to embed YouTube links directly onto user profiles. This solidified MySpace as the go-to place for music discovery. Lily Allen, Calvin Harris, and Grimes were all artists who were discovered and signed to record labels thanks to MySpace. Now, there are two other important figures that came out of MySpace. Though both of them initially used the platform to promote their music, neither went on to have lucrative careers as an artist. Instead, they actually became known as the internet's first influencers. And those two people are Tila Tequila and Jeffree Star. In the early 2000s, Tila Tequila was a Playboy model and a singer-songwriter. She had been using the social networking site Friendster to help build her public profile, which was a very forward-thinking strategy for the time. But she kept getting banned for the content that she posted. I had a hard time finding exactly what she was posting that kept getting her banned, but she claims that it was because of her quote-unquote big personality. In 2003, Tila joined MySpace instead. She told Time magazine, quote, "At the time, no one was on there at all. I felt like a loser while all the cool kids were at some other school. So I mass emailed between 30,000 and 50,000 people and told them to come over. Everybody joined overnight." And Tila had all these email addresses, presumably because she was such an early adopter to social networking sites. Quote, "Once they saw how I worked, everyone did what I did and started promoting themselves," she told Time. "This is my job. That's how you maintain your popularity and keep it alive." Tila's impact on the platform was significant, and her 2006 Time profile emphasized this. Quote, "Pre-Tila, your MySpace friends were mostly people you actually knew. Post-Tila, the biggest game on the site was who has the most friends, period, whoever they might be." Sadly, Tila's legacy on social media and the career of influencing has been largely destroyed after she publicly aligned herself with neo-Nazism. Jeffree Star is another problematic trailblazer in the online world who used MySpace to launch his influencing career. Jeffree joined MySpace 3 months after it launched. He used the platform like his own personal blog, sharing details about his private life and social commentary on topics like beauty, self-confidence, and fame. Jeffree's end goal was to promote his music and fashion designer career. Like Tila, Jeffree had built a fan base on other websites before joining MySpace by posting outlandish photos of himself. And MySpace actually sent Jeffree gifts like new cameras to incentivize him to keep posting on MySpace because his engagement was so high. By 2006, he was recognized as MySpace's most connected profile, and a few years later, he reached over 1 million friends. Again, this was all before social media influencing was even a thing. Tila and Jeffree were part of this very early cohort of aspiring celebrities who figured out that they could build fan bases via the internet, democratizing fame in a way that we had never seen before. In addition to influencing the world to join MySpace, Tila and Jeffree were also influential in the emergence of the scene queen subculture born out of the platform. The term scene queen referred to a group of mostly girls who skyrocketed to MySpace fame thanks to their scene aesthetic. Some of the most iconic scene queens were Jack Vanek, Audrey Kitching, Hannah Beth, and obviously Jeffree Star. The group was known for dating members of pop-punk bands like Panic at the Disco and Fall Out Boy. With this, the scene queens' personal lives quickly became a point of gossip and speculation for MySpace users. Scene queens aesthetically were marked by teased hair, rainbow raccoon dye jobs, and studded belts. While this might sound similar to emo fashion, another youth subculture that was pioneered on MySpace, the two aesthetics were very different. As Hattie Rex writes for Bustle, quote, "The emo kids were a lot more brooding and wore more black, whereas scenesters were excitable little rainbows who weren't even necessarily into the same music, let alone wardrobe choices." While these subcultures may have had their differences, both scene and emo emerged on MySpace as a challenge to conventional beauty standards. That being said, scene was much more than an aesthetic. With shared interests in video games and various pop punk bands and electro music, scene subculture built a strong sense of community and helped like-minded people find each other. Now, I couldn't cover MySpace's cultural impact without looking at the platform's quote-unquote coding legacy. As previously mentioned, one of the big draws to MySpace was that users could customize their profiles to showcase their personality or aesthetic, basically like an early marker of the online personal brand. This was done through basic HTML or CSS coding. As per Code Academy, quote, "Certain totems of the MySpace experience have stuck in our collective memories, e.g. the top 8, auto-playing music, and of course, Tom." But all of the features that made MySpace the cultural sensation that it was, the ability to style a profile page with HTML and CSS might have left the biggest footprint behind. MySpace wasn't the only site at the time that allowed customization through coding, but this feature became MySpace's legacy because it was the most popular platform. The MySpace coding legacy reemerged in the online zeitgeist last year when a discussion around Gen Z's quote-unquote lack of tech savviness circulated on TikTok. Many Gen X and Millennials noted that younger generations have only known the internet when it was user-friendly and not customizable. Because early tech was so janky, it forced us to learn how computer programming and software development worked, at least at a very high level. And MySpace played a big role in teaching these generations basic coding skills. As MySpace's cultural influence intensified, it's no surprise that different corporations started expressing interest in purchasing the platform. And one of them was News Corp. In July 2005, News Corp announced that it would be acquiring MySpace's parent company, Intermix Media Inc., for $580 million. According to a New York Times article published at the time, MySpace had around 16 million monthly users when it was purchased. And for some quick maths, today, $580 million would be just under $1 billion. And when we consider how much social media platforms are worth today, that doesn't really seem like a lot. However, this was a big move as far as internet history goes, because this was one of the first times that a big corporation backed the digital space in this way. Many businesses were skeptical about how advertisers would make money on these sites. But Rupert Murdoch, News Corp's CEO, purchased the platform with the intention that, quote, "the networking site will drive traffic to his Fox TV sites." After Murdoch purchased MySpace, it continued to experience exponential growth and hit 100 million registered users in August 2006, a significant milestone for the platform. According to NBC, quote, "In the 12 months after the News Corp acquisition, MySpace saw its unique visitors grow by 155%. Also in August 2006, Google signed a $900 million three-year deal to become the exclusive provider of ads for the site. By the time Murdoch attempted to merge MySpace with Yahoo in 2007, it was worth $12 billion. The inception and rise of MySpace was impressive, but sitting here in 2024, I haven't used MySpace in nearly 15 years, and chances are, neither have you. So what happened? How did the most prolific social networking site of the early 2000s become totally obsolete? There are a couple of major reasons behind the downfall of MySpace. Firstly, News Corp was a major contributor to MySpace's decline. This is largely because the culture changed when a major media company got on board. Now that MySpace had backing from a major organization, things became very corporate and over-bureaucratic, ultimately changing the culture of the platform. For example, the deal with Google posed long-term challenges. This deal compelled MySpace to increase the number of ads on its already saturated platform. In turn, it restricted MySpace's ability to experiment with user experience, as any changes could potentially compromise revenue streams. A former MySpace executive close to advertising sales told NBC News, quote, "It was a good deal in the short term, but in the long term, it ended up being not so good. We were incentivized to keep page views very high and ended up having too many ads plus too many pages, making the site less easy than a site like Facebook." In the years since, Murdoch has discussed the failure of MySpace, placing the blame on himself. Quote, "This was just ahead of Facebook, and MySpace was just about to start a video service where we would have been 3 months ahead of YouTube," he told Sarah Ashley O'Brien for CNN. "But we took bad advice. We put in a layer of bureaucracy." Murdoch continued by saying that News Corp should have, quote, "had faith in MySpace's existing management or replaced it." The problems that MySpace was facing internally were intensified as Facebook, originally named The Facebook, arrived on the scene. Ironically, MySpace founders actually met with Mark Zuckerberg, who offered to sell them Facebook for $75 million in 2004, but they didn't take it. For a time, young people were using both platforms, with MySpace being the most popular among the social media platforms. But the first signs of MySpace's decline were in April 2008, when Facebook overtook the platform in unique monthly visitors. At first, a major difference between the platforms was that Facebook was only available to college students. Interestingly, research fellow Kate Miltner and lecturer Ysabel Gerrard point to Dana Boyd's research on why Facebook overtook MySpace in popularity, and a lot of it has to do with racism. Quote, "Facebook and MySpace users became divided along racial lines, with white teens feeling that MySpace became dominated by what they saw as subcultural music tastes. The earliest Facebook adopters also had to have a .edu email address to register with the site, making it a marker of, quote, status and maturity for teens, further heightening its appeal. While white teens dominated MySpace at the height of its popularity, Facebook's then reputation as a more mainstream platform meant MySpace became increasingly valuable to minoritized teens. MySpace's demise sits within a broader, quote, gentrification of the internet. Beyond this, Facebook was just less glitchy, making the user experience better. MySpace's customization meant the platform had a lot of technical problems. This manifested in slow load times and extremely laggy profiles. Facebook, by contrast, was consistently updating features and the site interface, which was exciting for users. According to the Los Angeles Times, quote, "Some observers say MySpace clung too long to a portal strategy in which it sought to amass an audience around entertainment content. By contrast, Facebook maintained its focus on features that enhanced the social networking experience, such as the newsfeed." MySpace did try to copy some of Facebook's features, but they were just so much worse than the Facebook product itself, and that further alienated MySpace users. It soon became clear just how much MySpace was struggling, as the numbers of users fell and the company was forced to cut costs. Eventually, MySpace had to lay off a significant amount of staff. Quote, "MySpace on Tuesday said it was laying off 420 people, nearly 1 out of 3 employees, as part of an aggressive restructuring that seeks to make the company smaller and more agile. The action follows a management shakeup in April, in which MySpace founder Chris DeWolf was replaced with chief executive by Facebook's former chief operating officer, Owen Vanetta," writes the Los Angeles Times. Lastly, MySpace consistently had a reputation problem. Remember at the top of the episode when I discussed the shady business practices of MySpace's first parent company, eUniverse? Well, MySpace's early association with eUniverse had plagued their reputation across the tech and media industries. As the platform grew, MySpace continued to face reputation issues, especially amongst users, given the fact that many users on MySpace were going by pseudonyms and not their real name. While many users chose to go by a pseudonym out of fear, it made the platform increasingly dangerous for young people and furthered this negative reputation. Mike Jones, the former head of MySpace, explained that the fact that Facebook forced people to use their real names paved the way for their success. Quote, "Facebook's killer feature was that it replicated the real world by forcing people to use their real names, whereas MySpace users used handles," says Jones. The real problem was that the world had been trained by MySpace that social networking was interesting, but the actual product had been perfected by Facebook. After years of declining users and technical difficulties, News Corp sold MySpace to advertising company Specific Media for around $35 million in 2011, a far cry from the asking price of $100 million. MySpace and its parent company were later bought by Time Inc. and subsequently the Meredith Corporation. The story of MySpace ends in 2019, when reports emerged that the site had lost all of its content uploaded to MySpace prior to 2016. The platform cited a faulty server migration and claimed it happened sometime around 2018. This resulted in the loss of over 50 million tracks from 14 million artists and millions of user profiles and photos. The MySpace data loss feels like closure in a way, a symbolic ending to the early days of social networking and the millennial youth culture that dominated it. Though the archives may be lost forever, MySpace's impact on internet culture and technology has lived on. The platform paved the way for so many elements of the online world that exist today and gave us, the millennial generation, years of memories that honestly, we have probably mostly forgotten. And when I think back to my 13-year-old self posting who knows what on myspace.com from the desktop PC in my family's designated computer room, those memories are probably best forgotten. Infinite Scroll is a podcast written, produced, and presented by me, Lauren Meisner, for Centennial World. Additional research and reporting is by Annabelle Ben-David. Editing is by Danny Fennick. Thank you so much for listening. I love you guys so much, and I will talk to you guys next week. Bye!